The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, and the best digital health product.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation. The Galien Week of Innovation has been made possible thanks to our precious friends and partners who share the Galien Foundation's values. First off, the two exclusive platinum partners are We would now like to acknowledge our two gold partners. Furthermore, we proudly introduce our corporate leaders partners. The associate partners are the grantors are To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to work with outstanding media partners who have contributed to the Galien Foundation's renown.
Welcome to the Galien Foundation Week of Innovation webinars. This is Barış Erdoğan, the CEO of Clinarian, which is providing patented solutions to analyze electronic medical records real-time for better patient outcomes. Objective this week is to provide additional content and background for Galien Foundation's largest annual event, the Prix Galien US Awards, to be held this Thursday in New York, in conjunction with annual Galien Forum of speakers representing top scientific experts and leaders in global health. This new webinar series is developed to give the nominees for Best Pharmaceutical, Best Biotech, Best MedTech, and Digital Solutions products greater visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien US Awards has a record 84 nominees for 4 categories from 65 companies covering 15 diverse therapeutic areas ranging from cancer, cardiology, neurosciences to infectious and very rare genetic diseases. We will be looking closely at the products in all these critical areas throughout the week. Because of the number of nominees and the range of conditions represented by all this excellent science, the Galien US Awards Committee has decided to host a series of webinars prior to Thursday's forum and awards ceremony, where the winners in each of the 4 best of categories will be announced. In the best pharmaceutical category, which is our focus today, we'll be holding 6 webinars due to the large number of products representing this important field. This webinar now is devoted to the 3 nominees in hematologic cancers and gene-based tumor-agnostic therapies. What we cover today relates to this central fact. Will the success of novel gene-based therapies in advancing the survival timelines in blood and bone marrow cancers be repeated in the solid tumor setting with therapies that address each tumor's individual genetic profile rather than association with a particular organ of the body? We will have audience questions as well. Questions can be forwarded to me using the link provided on your screen. I'll do my best to address all the questions. Before moving to our discussion, let's have a quick poll. You'll be seeing the question here. What is the most promising new medical advance likely within the next 5 to 10 years? Please provide us feedback, and at the end, I will be announcing the most popular choices. Again, for our participants' information, we, the panelists and me, we can also vote for this poll here. Okay, now let's move right to our discussion. I will start by the introduction of 3 nominees representatives who are joining me for this webcast today. And I would like to thank them in advance. I would like to start with Dr. Shifali Agrawal. May I ask you to introduce yourself with a very brief description of your nominated product?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Shifali Agrawal. I'm a physician by training, and I'm Chief Medical and Development Officer at Epizyme. I'm representing Epizyme today. Epizyme has a platform of developing epigenetic drugs, and that's important because we are focusing on identifying and developing next generation of cancer medicines that target key epigenetic modulators, and have spent last decade developing a proven research platform to systematically identify and target key epigenetic targets that drive tumor cell proliferation and survival. We have so far looked at almost 600 targets, around 400 cell lines, and our first product is Tazverik, which basically is a commercially available product. It's the first EZH2 inhibitor that's commercially available. We developed the product in epithelioid sarcoma. This is really a big unmet need. There was no approved therapy in epithelioid sarcoma. It's an ultra-rare tumor. We had approval last year in that. And following that, we got approval in follicular lymphoma. As you know, EZH2 inhibitor is really important for B-cell biology and all heme malignancies, especially the mutation of EZH2 in follicular lymphoma. We did our study globally and got approval in that, and we are now approved in 3rd line and beyond setting at as early as 2nd line for Tazverik. So I believe Tazverik is a product and pipeline really important, applicable across solid and heme tumors. It's the first FDA approved, important for mutant wild type population follicular lymphoma, and because of its great specificity, it's unique because it can be combined with multiple different combinations across indications and can be used as a therapy. So really excited about this product and looking forward to further discussions.
Thank you, Shifali. I wish you good luck for the product and for the nomination. And dear Mark Mogul, thank you very much for joining us today. May I ask you the same thing, to introduce yourself and with a very brief description of your nominated product?
My pleasure. Thank you. Yes, my name is Mark Mogul. I was a pediatric hematologist oncologist for 27 years before joining Servier 3 years ago. Currently as the head of medical affairs. Our product is called Asparalis. Asparalis is a pegylated asparaginase. Asparaginase is an absolute cornerstone in the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL, which is the #1 type of cancer in pediatric and AYA patients. And it's a very important product, and this prolongs both the half-life as well as the stability and the shelf life of this product, allowing for it to be transported anywhere across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Dr. Ian Webb, can you please also introduce yourself to the audience with a brief description of your nominated product?
Certainly, and thank you. And I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity today. Great pleasure to be with you all. So my name is Ian Webb, also a hematologist oncologist by background, and my current role is as head of the U.S. Medical Affairs Organization for Oncology at Bayer. And the product that was nominated that we'll be discussing today is larotrectinib with trade name Vitrakvi, which is a first-in-class TRK inhibitor to treat tumors that have an NTRK or NTRK gene fusion. This is the first small molecule treatment to receive a tumor agnostic indication at the time of initial US FDA approval, and larotrectinib was granted a breakthrough designation by the FDA. It's indicated for the treatment of both adult and pediatric patients with solid tumors that have an NTRK gene fusion without a known resistance mutation, tumors that are metastatic or for which surgical resection would result in severe morbidity, or for which no satisfactory alternative treatments exist, or for patients whose tumors have progressed following treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So 3 great products we heard today. I'd like to remind the audience that there is an accessible link to a 100-word statement submitted by the companies on each of the 3 nominated products. This link is available for viewing during the webcast. Now, let's get to know the companies and the products a bit in detail. Ian, I would like to start with you. I have 2 questions for you to be able to address the details of your product. First I'd like to start with, why did your company choose to focus on the disease state and indication associated with the product? And as a result, in what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need?
Thank you so much for those great questions. So certainly we've made great strides in fighting cancer, and many treatments are already available. However, there is more work to be done to address unmet medical needs. Bayer's oncology franchise is focused on addressing unmet needs, and a significant example of this progress is the development of Vitrakvi, which is a first-in-class precision oncology medicine exclusively designed to address a critical unmet need for adults and children with solid tumors harboring an NTRK gene fusion. You know, it's the first and ever TRK inhibitor designed specifically to address these mutations, and represents a major paradigm shift in how we treat cancer, treating based on a genomic alteration rather than a specific tumor site. And when present, the NTRK gene fusion is an actionable oncogenic driver across solid tumors. That being said, you know, there are challenges associated with this product, and in terms of identifying the patients who can benefit from it. So in the US, it's estimated that there are between 2,500 and 3,000 patients whose cancers harbor an NTRK gene. Vitrakvi has shown rapid, robust, and durable responses with a consistent safety profile in these patients. But of course, those patients need to be identified, and I think we'll talk more about that a little bit later today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. So I would like to ask the same question to you, Mark. Just as a reminder to the audience and to you, I'd like to repeat the question. Why did your company choose to focus on this disease state and the indication associated with the product? And as a result, in what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical needs? Mark?
So thank you so much for the question. You know, so Servier Pharmaceuticals is very dedicated to developing therapies for hematologic malignancies, and Asparalis is an extremely important one of these. You know, Asparalis has been developed and is being delivered by a dedicated team who bring deep experience and continued commitment to advancing the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL, for our patients. Asparalis is a more stable asparaginase product, giving it a longer half-life and shelf life than the current standard pegaspargase. Asparaginase is a cornerstone of ALL treatment regimens. It works by depleting plasma asparagine, an amino acid that certain tumor cells, including ALL cells, depend on for growth and development, whereas normal cells can make their own asparagine. Thereby, Asparalis is thought to kill leukemic cells selectively, and Servier is expanding the therapeutic options for patients with who have the diagnosis of ALL. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And the same question again goes to Shifali this time. Just to repeat and remind the question, why did your company choose to focus on the disease state and indication associated with the product? And as a result, in what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical needs? Shifali?
Thank you. So Tazverik is an EZH2 inhibitor, which is a histone methyltransferase. And EZH2 plays a very important role in B-cell biology, as well as indirectly affecting PRC2 complex as an epigenetic modulator. So the way Tazverik was actually developed is we looked at very innovative trial design across multi-cohorts, multi-indication. And we noticed that in a very ultra-rare unmet need of kids, which is epithelial sarcoma, where there is no available therapy, no commercially approved drug, we were able to develop and show benefit and long-term stabilization with Tazverik. And the fact that it can be used, patients use that therapy even beyond progression. As a result, we actually got an ODAC, and we had a unanimous win in the ODAC for epithelial sarcoma for 11-0. That was our first indication. The second indication was follicular lymphoma, which was 6 months right after the first approval, and we got an approval in relapsed refractory follicular lymphoma. EZH2 plays an important role in B-cell biology, and because of that, we believe the specific mutation, the benefit was really remarkable in patients. It not only showed benefit in EZH2 mutation patients, but also wild type. And now we are working on combining Tazverik with multiple different products. The safety profile, as you can see, is really remarkable, and that's the reason the strength of Tazverik, not only activity but also a benefit. Although follicular lymphoma has a treatment available, but there is still patients progress. It's still not curable, and epithelial sarcoma is one of the rare ultra tumors. So our goal was to be able to not only impact pediatric patient population and ultra rare tumor, but also tumors like heme malignancies in follicular lymphoma, and eventually DLBCL, and combine with multiple therapies.
Thank you very much, Shifali. I mean, from my end, I see that all three products are really bringing amazing value to the patients for their unmet medical needs. It's really difficult to select which is better, so it's a real difficult task for the jury to select the product. So I'd like to continue with my second question here, and I want to address it to Mark first. So Mark, is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with this product? What has been the clinician response to the product thus far? Can you please give us some details on this?
Really, thank you. So, fortunately, the clinical outcomes for patients treated with Asparalis are excellent. ALL accounts for about 75% of the childhood leukemias in the United States, but it's fortunately also one of the most treatable types of childhood leukemia, and the 5-year survival rate now is over 90%. Asparalis is now allowed to be substituted in multiple pediatric ALL trials, and all 3 pediatric ALL consortia, the Dana-Farber, the Children's Oncology Group, and the St. Jude Consortia, are committed to using Asparalis in all successor ALL clinical trials. Thank you.
That's great. And same question for Shifali this time. Just to remind, is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with your product? And what's been the clinician response to the product thus far? Can you please give us some details?
Sure. So as I mentioned, this is the first commercially available EZH2 inhibitor and unique of its kind that got approved in 2 indications within 6 months time frame. The first indication, epithelial sarcoma, is an ultra rare tumor. The survival in that indication is less than a year. And these are ped patients all the way from 6 months to 18 years. And so we could see substantial benefit. We saw physicians using this therapy even beyond progression because it was safe and it showed activity and stabilization. Not only that, after that, we saw benefit in follicular lymphoma. that was our second indication, where we saw that physicians are really adapting it because the therapies that are available in these indications have a lot of toxicity baggage. And because of the fact that it's active and it's safe, it can be used across both heme and solid tumors and can be combined with all the multiple standard of care. So I think having a product that can be used in ultra-rare tumor type, as well as can be combined and is active, is a really a remarkable thing.
Thank you, Shifali. And I'd like to ask the same question to Ian this time. Again, just as a reminder, I'll repeat the question. Is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with your product, Ian? And what's been the clinician response to the product thus far?
Yeah, I think there's a great interest and excitement in developments in oncology, and certainly we've seen great interest among clinicians in this product. In terms of measurable outcomes, I'd maybe just share with you some recent data for this agent. First of all, it's worth noting that the TRACFI's efficacy analysis is based on pooled data from 3 separate phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. And at ASCO 2021, with extended follow-up, we were able to share that with this agent, there was a 75% overall response rate, including 22% complete responses, and great interest. There was maintenance of response with median duration of response of approximately 49 months in the approximately 200 patients who were followed. And then in further analysis that we shared at ESMO, looking at prior lines of therapy, it would evident that this drug has effect in patients despite the number of lines of therapy, but certainly the highest response rates were seen in the first line of therapy for those patients with this important oncogenic driver mutation.
Thank you very much, Ian. Yes, so I'd like to continue with another question. I will start with Shifali this time. Shifali, what challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human trials and ultimately to a market authorization? Any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding of the medicine innovation process? What can you share with us?
Yeah, I think, as Epizyme has been around for a while. We have a platform for epigenetic drugs. We have been looking at multiple different targets and refining the targets, and now have another product that's going into clinic and multiple other products going into IND. So going from a research platform, then going to a innovative trial designs of, as Ian was talking about, phase 2 trials, where you have multiple cohorts and trying to analyze, and then filing for a, subpart H approval, and then doing a confirmatory phase 3 study. It's a lot required there, because you have to kind of plan initially a proof of concept, go think about regulatory interactions. How do you do that? And how do you prepare your company for a smaller biotech company like ours, for a commercial, readiness, including medical affairs? I think the Epizyme has done that really remarkably, building, not only keeping our research platform live, but like I mentioned, that we have other products coming to clinic, but also maintaining innovative clinical trials and then preparing for commercial launch. I think the best is, how do you navigate between proof of concept studies and then do phase 3 registration studies and then be ready for that approval thing as a small biotech? It's been a very interesting journey. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really proud of Epizyme doing that very well.
Thank you very much, Shifali. So I'd like to ask the same question to Ian to get their experience on the buyer side. So just to repeat the question, Ian, what challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human trials and then ultimately to a market authorization? Any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding of the medicine innovation process? What can you share with us today?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So, certainly, there are challenges associated with bringing to market a drug that is based on a therapeutic approach that addresses a high unmet need situation, but a rare oncogenic driver mutation. And depending on the tumor type, it can be, 1%, 2% of the tumors. So certainly that causes challenges in the drug development process. I mentioned a few minutes ago, that the approval was based on pooling data from 3 trials, and certainly FDA was amenable to that approach. But really, that was necessary in order to have enough patients to get a sense of response rate and durability of response in those patients. But I think, if I have to think about a take-home message for the audience, it's really about testing and testing appropriately. And so, in order to assess the gene fusions for NTRK, you need to do next generation genomic sequencing to assess the patients. And so those patients have to be tested. So, you have to test a lot of patients to find the patients who have those mutations. And then, then the drug can be used. And so certainly, during the clinical trial process and now as well, now that the drug is on the market, a lot of the work that we're doing is, working with partners in the oncology community to raise awareness about testing and to do what we can to help identify the patients who can benefit from Vitrakvi for treatment of patients with the NTRK gene fusions.
Thank you very much, Ian. And same question goes to Mark. What challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human trials and ultimately to a market authorization? Any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding of the medicine innovation process? What can you share with us? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So Asparalis is an approved asparaginase. This fortunately transitioned nicely from concept to clinical trials. The safety and efficacy of Asparalis was demonstrated in 2 randomized controlled clinical trials with pegaspargase or Oncaspar as the comparator, namely the Dana-Farber 11001 study and the Children's Oncology Group 07P4 trial. The determination of efficacy was based on a demonstration of the achievement and maintenance of a nadir serum asparaginase activity above the level of 0.1 units per ml. That was using Asparalis at 2,500 international units per meter squared intravenously every 3 weeks versus pegaspargase at 2,500 units per meter squared intravenously every 2 weeks. That level of 0.1 is associated with complete serum asparagine depletion. So what we learned from this is that patients now have the ability to receive a drug every 3 weeks versus every other week while maintaining an excellent efficacy and safety profile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'd like to thank all our panelists today. And I will remind our audience to send their questions directly to us, and I will try to address those questions to our participants today. I think we have completed the part to introduce and to explain our products and experience throughout the development of our products, from the proof of concept towards the authorization. And now I would like to ask some questions individually to you as scientists and clinicians. So maybe I can start with Shifali. So Shifali, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? And what new areas of science in the fight against major chronic conditions excite you the most? And if you combine these together, maybe like in the future, if Galien Awards committee are coming together, what would they be reviewing from 5 years from now? What does the future look like?
Yeah, I think really the future is moving towards targeted therapies where you actually find the right patient. So, it is moving away from trying to just target all the cells. It's actually moving more towards innovative science, where you really, as Ian was talking about, you test patients to find the right patient so the therapy works for them. And I think whether it is epigenetic platform that we have, we are specifically looking at all the different targets across, and not only finding targets that may be important for the medication, but also specific so that the toxicity profile is actually is better, so that you can combine the therapies. I think the new era is gene and cell therapy, of course, and genetic therapies in the form of whether it could be epigenetic modulators that we are developing as well. I think eventually what I see is that as a physician, what I can say is that we really need to have the therapies for the patient. It should be very personalized, because otherwise you're basically trying to hit a target that may not be effective for that particular patient. So what I see as a future is, as a scientist, that we can be there eventually to look for patients, do right testing, understand the right markers, and then use specific drugs targeting that markers to be able to treat that patient, so that there is that personalized effect of that medication. And our goal at Epizyme, starting with Tasveric, which is really a very biomarker driven, that EZH2 inhibitor, where we are targeting patient population there. We are also looking at another one as SETD2, where we are looking at multiple myeloma. So finding those targets that is specifically for that disease will be critical. And I think that's where I see the future.
Thank you very much, Shifali. So I'd like to ask the same question to Mark. Having your scientist and clinician hat, Mark, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? And what new areas of science in the fight against major chronic conditions excite you most personally? And again, from 5 years from now, what do you think we are going to be discussing, and what Galien Awards Committee will be reviewing from 5 years from now?
Thank you for the question. So at Servier, we bring a very focused approach to growing our oncology program, focusing on areas of significant unmet need. Our clinical oncology program is focused on 3 main areas: apoptosis, immuno-oncology, and cellular metabolism. Today, Servier has more than 20 oncology assets at varying stages of clinical development, consisting of a variety of targets, with ongoing research with BCL2 inhibitors, anti-PD-L1, and anti-CD19 therapies that can be used in combination with other assets in our program or as single agents. As I mentioned before, I came to industry after 27 years as a pediatric oncologist, and I'm so excited by the speed at which new therapies are becoming available for patients of all ages. To see patients cured who would otherwise have been incurable really is just such a blessing. We're growing quickly to expand our role as a recognized leader in oncology. To help us achieve this goal, we need people willing and interested in stretching themselves to meet our growth goals. In addition, enhancing and promoting our R&D and medical capabilities for our next round of accomplishments, will be especially important for increasing our profile with patients, payers, and the research community. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'd like to ask the same question to Ian as well. Just as a reminder, Ian, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against major chronic conditions excite you the most? And what will be Galien Foundation or Galien Awards Committee reviewing 5 years from now?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, I just want to start actually by just commenting on how we're all working together at this point in time. And so, certainly, I think the advances that we've seen in recent years would not be possible without the level of, partnership and collaboration that we see. That certainly can exist between small companies and big companies, but, more importantly is, includes academia, patients, patient advocacy organizations, caregiver organizations, and funding groups such as venture capital. And without that level of commitment across multiple different groups of stakeholders, really, I don't think we'd see the innovation we've had today and the innovation we're going to have. What I expect to see, progress in many different kinds of therapies for cancer over the next few years. Precision oncology approaches targeting mutations such as Vitrakvi does. Targeted therapies will continue to progress, including small molecules and large molecules, antibody drug conjugates, targeted radionuclide therapies, cell and gene therapy, and the next wave of immuno-oncology approaches, and those that our colleagues on the call today shared as well. So I expect to see, given the level of commitment to dealing with cancer that we see today, that we're going to see advances across all of those areas in the next few years, and it's going to be a very challenging situation for the Prix Galien to choose a winner, but I think that's a good outcome.
Thank you very much, Ian. So I'm curious about my very valuable participants today. I'm curious to get your opinion on technology being part of all this development life cycle, technology and the data use, how it could help all the pharmaceutical companies and innovative companies to develop new products, as well as to follow the long-term effectiveness of the products, etc. So I'd like to start with you, Mark. Actually, you had an amazing 27 years as a clinician where you were producing data when you were treating patients, and then you switched to the industry on a party or a stakeholder that is utilizing the data produced in those real world settings, to understand the diseases, because you are working on targeted therapies, etc., precision medicine, etc. So I'm really curious, in your professional career now, how are you utilizing the data, or how are the groups in your company utilizing the data when, first of all, when you are putting new product ideas in your pipeline, and then when you're designing those proof of concepts and designing the study protocols, and then the further stages, how are you utilizing this real world data? Because it's very trendy nowadays, real world data and real world evidence. I'd like to get your opinion on this and experience on this.
Yeah, thank you. I was been very pleasantly surprised when I came to industry to see how active HEOR, real world evidence, is playing in industry. In fact, we have an entire division, I think, of 12 people that spend their full time in doing this, and mining data has been really very important. I mean, particularly now that we have some of these, very large payers that maintain their data, and so you have access now to real world evidence on sometimes tens of thousands of patients. And so when you're looking for some very subtle changing, does, pre-medication help with preventing hypersensitivity reactions, for example, while maintaining efficacy? I mean, looking at the pooled data of many, many tens of thousands of patients who received one therapy, for example, an adult type regimen for ALL versus a pediatric type regimen for ALL, and seeing the differences in toxicities and potential increase in survival. I mean, that is a huge boon to have that ability to look at that. And so we're making great use of that. And I hope with that, we'll be able to see more and more innovations and be able to convince providers who have been set in treating patients in one way that perhaps there's another way that the data bears out is more efficacious and more safe.
So again, maybe just as a follow-up to this, Mark, just put yourself in your past as a clinician. How open would you be in sharing your data for research, for advancement of research? How open would you be, if you were still a clinician?
So as a pediatric oncologist, almost invariably, you are part of an academic institution that's affiliated with one of the 3 pediatric consortia. So for many, many years, I was part of what's called the Children's Oncology Group. And so if you're a child with cancer in this country, you have a 95% chance of being put on a national cooperative group study. And so all patients go on a clinical trial, which is just such a benefit, I think, for them and for the future of patients. And so sharing data in that regard is something that we've always done. And so I think that's something that I'm very comfortable with. I think it's absolutely important, particularly when you're dealing with relatively rare diseases like pediatric cancer.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your answer. And Ian, how do you and your colleagues utilize data for, when designing your studies, or when you are deciding on your pipeline of products, or then afterwards, after post-authorization, how do you utilize the data strategically in your company?
Yeah, so certainly this is, as you indicated, an area where there's a lot of interest and a lot of value to be found. And of interest, the group in our company that works in this area is called DGOS, Data Generation and Observational Studies. And what I would say is certainly observational studies are still done. We certainly do prospective observational studies still, and we certainly look at patient-related, patient-reported outcomes and other data from sponsored studies. But the data generation piece involves pulling data from multiple different sources, and it involves pulling data for a variety of purposes. So first of all, the clinical team may want to look at real-world data to generate a synthetic control arm for a clinical trial, or the commercial team may want to understand, how many patients have an NTRK gene fusion or some other, population-related analysis to try and assess, what is the unmet medical need that we're thinking about for an asset. And then certainly on the medical side, we're looking at ways to define unmet medical need and look for the impact of our medicines and other medicines in different tumor types, lines of therapy in real world data. So there are a lot of different opportunities there, and certainly, we have a variety of real world data sources that we use, and I imagine my colleagues here on the call use them as well. And they provide a wealth of information. The challenge is how to analyze it, but that's where the expertise is, and certainly not mine, but the team helps with that dramatically. And it's a real advancement that I think is going to accelerate our quest to deal with this challenge in disease or disease sets.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Shifali, I'd like to ask the same question to you as well. In your company, how do you utilize the real-world data and real-world evidence outcomes in your planning, either the product pipeline or your long-term effectiveness after authorization, or for any other kinds of purposes? Can you please let us know about your experience?
Yeah, I think in our company, we have used real world data a lot, actually, in all our submissions, frankly. And I'll tell you why. We started with epithelial sarcoma, where there was nothing approved in that particular indication. There's no data at all. And so there is no approval, there is no data package. So you don't know how to compare. What is the standard of care? What is the efficacy in that indication? So what we did was we actually went back and looked at, as Mark was saying, looked at data from patient charts retrospectively and figured out what exactly is used in that indication, because there is no specific approved product. So that was very helpful, especially as we were filing with our product, showing the agency and ourselves as what is actually standard of care in that indication, because it's such an ultra rare indication and you cannot do big trials to find that anyway. So it was very important. I think the second way we used was the EZH2 inhibitor. As you know, that when you target a patient population, there's always a question, especially because EZH2 is part of FLIPPs in follicular lymphoma. So the question was, is that a positive prognostic factor? Do you really do better if you have an EZH2 inhibitor? So we need to really understand that. So we did a big natural history study to understand, does EZH2 change by line of therapy? Is it related to outcomes? And we were able to publish that almost 1,000 patient real world data. What's exciting today with real world is that even the agency is opening to it. We saw that example of DLBCL approval with TAFA, where they compared with real world and made that synthetic control that Ian was talking about. I think it's a really exciting opportunity to use real world data, especially in a small biotech company like us, to not only understand clinically how it is, understand medically what you want to message to physicians, and commercially, what is your unmet need? So all across, and we have a good group to actually look at that. And we see that in all our trials, we try to do a prospective, a retrospective, a natural history study to find those answers.
That's great. Shifali, I have a follow-up question, actually. You mentioned that you had some chart reviews to collect more data because there was no data available. So how did you ensure diversity? Did you focus on a single population, or you focus on different populations? How did you manage that diversity issue?
No, I think that's a very important topic. And as we looked at a selection of sites where we went back and looked at patients, we wanted to make sure where the patients, so as Mark was talking about, this is a pediatric tumor, epithelial sarcoma. And so you had to look at certain academic centers where they treat these patients specifically. So we went back and talked to those physicians, partnered with them, and made sure that there's a diverse population enroll, whether it is in Chicago or it's in New York. Or so we had a diverse group of sites included as we went for chart review. And then also one thing that Ian brought up is very critical is trying to understand the baseline characteristics, the propensity score. How do you match that criteria? And that's what we did in order to ensure we have a population that we could compare with what we are studying, which is critical.
Thank you very much, Shifali. So I think I can accommodate one more question that I am curious of. We still have some time. So, there is another trending topic nowadays. As a person having a technology background, I'm really curious about how the pharmaceutical companies are benefiting from the technology and data. So there is, again, a big use of artificial intelligence, machine learning predictive algorithms, etc. Maybe this time I start with you, Ian, at Bayer, with your colleagues. How are you leveraging the AI and ML? Are you doing anything around this? And what kind of experiences can you talk about today, if you have any?
Yeah, so certainly, as we look at data and technology, I mean, we talked about data sources and analysis a minute ago. Certainly, artificial intelligence can play a role in analyzing the data, and so certainly that's part of it. And the other part is sort of moving to a situation, and I'm thinking, commenting from a medical affairs point of view right now, going from a situation where a physician needs information about a drug and wants to understand what to do, and in quote unquote the old days, a lot of times you'd have to submit something, and then maybe 2 weeks later you get a letter. Now we're moving more and more to real time responsiveness, including a chatbot that was that recently developed and launched at Bayer, which is super exciting, because I know I'm this way, and I'm sure all of you are. Is when I want to know something, I want to know the answer now, right? Not later. And so artificial intelligence, in addition to analyzing data as a whole, can also targeted the response in an automated way for a physician, for a patient, and then also figure out if the answer can't be generated that way, how to then channel that request to human respondents so they can be addressed. So it's very exciting, and that responsiveness element, I think, is so critical.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'd like to ask the same question to you, Mark. How did you, when you were practicing, did you ever try AI and ML in your practice for some projects or for some purposes? And then afterwards, in your professional career on the pharmaceutical side, how are you utilizing AI and ML technologies at your company?
So I have to say, I personally don't have a lot of experience in this area, not as a clinician, and it's an area where our company is certainly having discussions about that, but it's not something that we have actively moved into using at this point. So pretty difficult for me to comment pretty much beyond that.
Just maybe, I am curious, again, I'm always bringing up your clinician hat. If you were, when you were practicing, if you had solutions, for example, analyzing the images that for the tumor sizes to see how effective the therapy was, etc. How useful would that be to clinicians? Getting some support, also for diagnosing, for example, in order to remove the human errors. How useful could the AI be in our daily lives when we are treating patients?
Now, that's a really interesting question. I think if this was something that there was great validity and it was repeatable, I think that would be markedly useful. I mean, if you look at particularly in higher risk patients where you're doing a phase 1 or a phase 2 study and seeing even very small increments in tumor size, particularly irregularly shaped tumors where it's difficult to capture the exact tumor volume. If there are better ways of doing that, or again, looking at certain markers on the tumors, if AI could benefit that, I think that would be a great win.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Shifali, I would also like to get your experience on AI and ML technologies in your company.
So I think I'm very much like Mark. We haven't used a lot of AI yet in the company. Being a small biotech, we are still trying to figure out. But I can tell you that as you asked that question, I think it'll be very important because one of the things that for example, we have been doing things like that, like farm modeling. We do modeling to find the data to generate to understand the hypothesis of the drug, how the drug works. I think similar things can be used in prediction of the drug response, in trying to understand what the safety profile would be. I think that will help. And if you can actually get real-time answer, like Ian said, will be very helpful for us quickly. I think it's a great potential, but I can tell you that it's still early for many of the companies, especially early companies, smaller companies like me.
I totally understand. Thank you very much. So, Ian, you had mentioned about patient-reported outcomes when you were answering one of my questions. And again, there is a technology linked to this. There are many companies doing social listening to understand and to get insights from the patients because, it is not that easy to collect these patient-reported outcomes from patients. It takes a lot of time to get and collect or reach out to patients. So how effective would you think that social listening could help pharmaceutical companies to get these insights from the patients and get these feedback from the patients? Would that be a useful technology that can help us here?
Yeah, I think it's very useful. I mean, certainly, there are pros and cons to social media, right? That we're well familiar with, right? So certainly, there's a wealth of information that you could gather there. Gone are the days when the only news was on on the TV screen or in the newspaper, or the only information, right? So certainly social media is important, and a variety of groups that we interact with use social media. So you mentioned patients, but also physicians, caregivers, etc. So I think there's a lot to be learned about what information is being shared, what misinformation is potentially being shared, and what people care about. And so certainly we try our best, or have tried our best in industry over years to use, I guess, what I would describe as conventional methods to try and understand what physicians and patients care about. But certainly, looking for clues in social media, I think, is really important. We do have some partnerships where we're doing that right now, looking at social listening. So, for example, after the ASCO Congress or ESMO, and you want to see what the buzz is, right? What people are talking about, what they care about, be it a product, be it clinical data, your data, other people's data. So it's really fascinating area. Really challenging, though, given the volume of information that's out there. But certainly, if you have a search strategy, which could often be an AI-driven search strategy, it's I think going to be something we have to do. If we're not doing it already in industry.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Shifali, I'm curious about a smaller biotech, whether you are utilizing, whether you are doing patient-reported outcome, and then you would consider doing social listening, or you're already doing that maybe. So I'd like to get your ideas and experience on this topic.
I think patient-reported outcomes are critical, but especially for drugs that, quality of life is important for the patients, right? It's not just what you look in trials and you actually see efficacy and response rate. We really have to see how patients are benefiting with the drug in terms of quality of life in many of these indications. So, when you look at patient-reported outcome, there are different ways to collect it. One is in a clinical trial setting, when you have controlled, you have these, different technology platforms now to collect patient-reported outcome. The other is partnership with advocacy groups, where you actually have opportunity to partner with patients who are taking the drug or products itself. And then real world data as well, where you have charts and you are able to collect that information. And lastly is social media. I think social media is a great opportunity to be able to gather that information, but I really will support Ian. What he's saying is that we have to be careful how we filter that information, because sometimes it's also personal experience, how you view that, and it may not be relevant, relative to the whole product itself. So I think there is wealth of information. You have to just be able to filter. We do that all the time in our company. We also have partnered with many firms like that to be able to filter that information and actually help us. Many times, some of the things that people write in social media are helpful to understand as you think about your product and your development. So I support that in both clinical trial setting, real world data, or in social media.
Thank you very much, Shifali. And lastly, Mark, my question will be addressed to you. How do you think about the patient-reported outcome, and how do you think social listening could help here?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. I think we here at Servier, I think one of the really proud of is the fact that we have an entire patient advocacy division, and they. If you look at our patient population, a large proportion of them are adolescent young adult patients, and they live online essentially. And so that division spends a lot of time with advocacy groups for the adolescent young adult patient. There's absolutely open web chatter between the two. All questions are appreciated. I think we have a very good working relationship in that way to disseminate information to them as well as to receive information back. And it's been very, very well received. And it's something that we're definitely interested in continuing and growing.
Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your experience and insights on this. So before we break apart, I'd like to see and show the results of our poll today, if possible, Matthew. Okay, really interesting results here. All right, so thank you very much to all our 3 company representatives who joined the panel with me today. This webcast is viewable on Galien Foundation's homepage. I'd like to kindly remind you all tomorrow's Galien Jubilee Forum. Again, tomorrow evening, we will have the pre-Galien Awards and presentation of the 2021 Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award winner. This will be given jointly to CEOs of the companies that led this year's unprecedented early arrival of vaccines, tanks, and therapeutics to fight COVID-19. Having said this, thank you everybody for being with us today, and thanks to all my participants, all speakers here today joining this webinar with me, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.